In this presentation, we will set up the beginning work in process or WIP balances within QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Pro. Here we are in our practice problem 1 with the one job cost tracking work in process. We have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by selecting the view dropdown and the open windows list. We're now going to set up those beginning balances for our job. So if we go back to our Excel worksheet, let's take a look at our objective. I'm going to be here in tab 1.1, which is going to be our beginning point for the worksheet. We have the beginning balances then in the job. We have a total job of work in process of the 83,000. That's going to be the parent account, the general ledger account. That is then backed up or supported by the subsidiary ledger consisting of the job cost sheets, job 14 having 41,000 in it broken out, 14,000 direct materials, 18,000 in the direct labor, and then the factory overhead, the 9,000, and then job 15, which has 18, 16, and 8 in direct materials, labor, and overhead, and nothing is in the current beginning balance as of the starting point in job 16. So our objective then is to get this 83,000 on the books. Then we're going to enter the rest of the beginning balances. But before we do that, I want to get the 83,000 on the books. I cannot do that with simply a journal entry because we need to support it but with the job cost sheets and therefore must use forms. So let's take a look at that. That's our objective, to get this on the books right now, to do whatever we need to do to get that on the books, and to get the supporting job cost sheets on the books. If I go back to the QuickBooks then, I'm going to say, well, how can I do that? If I just use the journal entry like I would normally do to enter the beginning balances or something like that, I'd go to the company dropdown, make journal entries. I'm not going to have the same kind of mechanism in order for me to post this to a job to have it go to the job cost sheet. Therefore, closing this back out, I need to enter it with some type of form. The forms are what allow me to enter the job cost sheet. It'll still enter a journal entry, but it's going to do it in such a format that the supporting documentation will then be done with one step. That's going to be our objective. So what we want to do is debit the 83,000 or increase the work in process, put the credit wherever we need to go for now. We could fix that side with a journal entry and then have the supporting documentation. I'm going to do that with a check. So we're actually going to write a check, and that'll affect the checking account, but that's okay because it'll do what we want it to do, and then we'll fix the checking account. Now, we haven't set up a checking account. Note that I set one up here in the interim. So if you don't have a checking account set up, then go to the lists drop down, the chart of accounts, and then you're going to want to go to the add account, and you want a new account. Within the new account, you're simply going to set up a checking account for it. So it's going to be a basic account type setup. Let me close this back out. I'm going to go into this, edit the account, and it'll look like this. It'll be a banking type of account, and you want it to be the checking account. That's it, basic checking account we're going to set up. We're going to say save and close, closing out the chart of accounts, going back to the home tab, and then we're going to write our check. So we're going to write our check. And I'm going to make this as of the end of the last time period, so 12/31/19. I want to make these at the beginning time period because the beginning period to be what they need to be, and any transactions that are putting those beginning balances in place are as the end of last time period. In other words, we're going to start entering this data as of 2020, January 1st. Therefore, any beginning balances we want to enter, we want to do that in the prior time period so we can do any adjustments that need to happen, and so that any temporary accounts like income statement accounts will then close out to equity, the balance sheet account, during as of the current time period that we're starting to enter the data for. And then we're going to tab through this. I'm not going to put even a payee. I'm going to go down here. The key is we need to be on the items tab, not the expenses tab. That allows us to enter the items. That's the key mechanism that we need to use, the items. Now we're going to type in the item of direct material. Direct material, if I go back over here, that's going to be 14,000. Now note that the direct material may be something that is broken out into, you can have different items for direct materials depending on what you buy, like cement or, stucco in or whatever you could buy on it. We'll take a look at more detail later. For now, we're going to have the generic categories, which could be used as well, just depending on how much detail you're gonna want in the system. So, okay, so we're going to go back over here. We're going to say direct materials to learn the mechanism here. We're going to say that this is going to be a cost of 14,000, and then the job it's going to go to is job 14. Now we're going to keep it at billable so that we can also use this to basically bill the customer. In other words, when we create an invoice, it'll pull this amount up and it'll put it on the invoice if we so choose to use that. So then we're going to say the next one, let's set up the next item, which is going to be direct labor, and that's going to be, if I go back over here, we said the 18,000. So I'm going to go back down. I'm going to say, let's put this in for 18,000. Not there, but here, 18,000. And it's also going to be for job 14. I'm going to keep it at billable. And then we have the overhead. So the overhead is 9,000. So I'm going to go back over here and type in the overhead. And that's going to be for 9,000. And once again, job 14, and it's billable. So there's our information. Now I'm going to say save and close. Let's see what it does. I'm going to say save and close. Then if we go to the reports drop down up top, and we go to the company and financial, and then down to the balance sheet standard, and change the dates up top to 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. This is the current period we will be running. We're going to say, okay, there's the 41,000 in the checking account, the other side in work in process. So we're not worried about the checking account now. We're going to adjust that as needed when we adjust our beginning balances. This is what we wanted to have in place. If I double click on that 41,000, then we get to the detail. I'm going to change the beginning date up top to the 2019, so we can see our detail. Double checking on any of these will give us our check. Closing this back out, closing this back out. I'm going to check do not show me this and no. So then I'm also going to go to the trial balance. Now the trial balance is something you really want to get used to because it'll simplify our bouncing around from the reports to check all the numbers. So I'm going to go to the reports drop down. I'm going to go to the company, to the accounting and taxes, and then trial balance. I'm going to change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And notice how much easier it is to see. Now, so we want to get used to debits and credits if we can, but even without those, we can see that the numbers going up and down, and they're right, the accounts are right next to each other. We don't have, in other words, the balance sheet, all this subtotal activity, which kind of muddies the water up. So that's our information there. Also note that if we go to our reports up top, we go to the job, time, and mileage, and we're going to be running the job estimate versus actual. And let's start off with the summary report. And so that's going to be our estimate versus actual. There we have our actual number there. So we have the 41,000 for job 14. If I was to say another report, drop down up top, and we go to the jobs and mileage, and we want now the detail report, job estimate versus actual detail, for the particular job of job 14, and say okay. Now we have the breakout of direct labor, materials, and factory overhead, breaking it out in essence by the items that we have set up. Okay, closing this back out. We're going to do the same process now. I'm going to keep everything else open for the other job, which is job 15. So job 15 is going to have direct materials, labor, and overhead, 18,000, 16,000, and 8,000. Let's do that. So we're going to go back over. I'm going to go back to the home tab. We're going to go back to the enter check. So we're going to write another check. We're going to write a check down here. Now, sometimes it takes me to this screen. I'm not sure exactly. I think that's because I have it to print. So what I do here is I'm going to double click on this prior check I wrote, and I'm going to uncheck this box that says print later. I don't want to print it later. I want it to assign a check number 1. And then I'm going to say save and new, and you have changed it yes, and that's going to give us our new check. And then I'm going to double click on this and go next so that we can actually see the check. We could enter it into the register, but I like to see the check. So I'm going to go into the check again. We're going to do the same process, and we're going to go back down here. We're going to be on the items tab, And then within the items tab, we're going to be entering direct materials 18,000. So I'm going to say direct materials, and this is going to be for 18,000. The job is going to be job 15, and it is billable. Direct labor now, so we're going to type in direct labor, and that is going to be for the amount of the 16,000. So we're going to say 16,000 for job 15. And then we're going to say factory overhead. And factory overhead we have here at 8,000. Putting that on the books for 8,000. And that's job 15. So there we have it. That adds up to the 42,000. 42,000, that's what we are starting out with. That's what we want. So I'm going to say save and close, and yes. And then if we go back to our balance sheet, we'll see that we have this checking account. We're going to have to adjust for that, but the work in process is 83,000. Going back to our report here, it's on the books at a total of 83,000. That's what we want. And the job cost sheets add up to 83,000. This number plus this number is 83,000. So if we go to our job cost sheet, then job cost versus actual, I'm going to click on this and say yes. And there we have our 83,000 here. Now remember, we're concentrating now for the rest of the problem really on the actual costs. We're not really considering the estimated. You can think about the estimate to think about, the percentage of completion and so on, but we're really considering here now the actual cost. So this is what we have so far, because the actual cost is what ties out to the balance sheet, or it's useful to always be going back to the trial balance. And that's what's on the 83,000. So there's the 83,000. It is now supported by the job cost sheet. That's the point. Also note that if you go back to the jobs versus actual, if you didn't put the estimates in here, this report will not run properly oftentimes. Therefore, even if you're not using the estimates and you just simply want to use the actuals, put the estimates in there, because that'll help you. That'll make it so you can see the actuals. If you want to filter out the estimates in the filters screen here, so that they don't bother you, or if you're not using them, you can filter them. You may be using estimates in some other way. Maybe you have a system for doing your own estimates, and you simply want to enter the actual numbers into the system. So you can do that. Last report, let's take a look at the reports drop down. We're going to go to the jobs time and mileage. We're going to scroll back down and look at the job estimate versus actual detail report. Then we're going to be taking a look at the job 15 and OK. And now we have the detail broken out: direct labor, materials, and overhead.